All right, welcome back, future clinicians and colleagues, to today's Explainer. We are taking a definitive step away from the realm of pop psychology today, and we're diving straight into the hard neurobiology of our modern attention crisis. I really want us to completely reframe how we look at our daily digital distractions. We've got to stop looking at compulsive scrolling as some sort of moral failing or just a simple lack of willpower. Instead, we need to start analyzing it for exactly what it is, a quantifiable neurological pathology. We're going to examine the exact mechanisms that hijack our brain architecture, and honestly, as future medical professionals, understanding this pathology is absolutely vital.
Okay, so looking at our agenda for today, we're covering the pathophysiology of evolutionary mismatch, the VTA and reward prediction error, the salience network and neural hijacking, a clinical profile on tonic dopamine depletion, supernormal stimuli and withdrawal, and finally, prognosis and neuroplastic rewiring.
Let's jump right in. Section 1. The pathophysiology of evolutionary mismatch.
Picture the human grain standing on the edge of a vast, silent forest thousands of years ago. Every little rustle in the grass, every glint of light, those were absolutely crucial signals that meant the difference between survival and extinction. Our ancient wiring was literally forged in a world of absolute scarcity to obsessively seek out those survival signals. Now fast forward to right now. Look at our modern environment. We're sitting in climate-controlled rooms, staring at glowing rectangles that are constantly screaming for our attention, offering endless, effortless hits of digital significance. Our ancient neurological machinery is, quite frankly, severely maladapted to this reality. It's a biological glitch, an evolutionary mismatch so profound that it's physically reshaping the architecture of our prefrontal cortex.
Moving right along to Section 2, the VTA and reward prediction error.
Let's zoom deeply into the midbrain architecture to dissect the ventral tegmental area, or the VTA. This beautifully illustrates the true driver of our behavior, reward prediction error. As neuroscientists and clinicians, you guys already know that the whole public perception of dopamine as just the pleasure chemical is fundamentally flawed. Deep inside your midbrain sits the small primitive cluster of neurons, the VTA, and it acts like a biological engine, pumping out dopamine not when you actually get what you want, but at the exact moment you think you might get it. It's the anticipation, the prediction of the reward, that causes the dopamine spike. This distinction is absolutely paramount because it's exactly what keeps the brain trapped in a continuous loop of endless seeking without ever actually reaching a baseline state of satisfaction.
And that brings us to the dopamine-seeking loop. The engineers driving the attention economy, they understand this brain architecture perfectly. They completely weaponize this engine using variable ratio schedules of reinforcement. It's the exact same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines the most addictive devices on the planet. Think about it. Step 1. An unpredictable trigger pops up, like a little red notification bubble. You have no idea what it is. Could be an important message from your boss, or it could just be spam. Step 2. Because that reward is completely unpredictable, your VTA anticipates the potential payoff and spikes your dopamine levels way higher than if the reward were actually guaranteed. And then Step 3. That intense craving literally forces an unconscious checking behavior. This is exactly why you'll see a patient open an app they just closed 3 seconds ago. They're operating on pure midbrain reflex.
Section 3, salience network in neural hijacking.
So as this variable reinforcement takes root, we start seeing systemic, network-level hijacking across the entire brain. The really crucial interaction to understand here is between the VTA's dopamine signals and the brain's salience network. Remember, the salience network is what decides which stimuli in our environment actually deserve our attention, but when it's constantly bombarded by digital dopamine spikes, it becomes wildly hypersensitized. It completely overtakes our empathy networks. We see this violent shift in neural priorities. The brain starts to prioritize the digital, the urgent, and the shocking over the physical, the important, and the true. True in-person connections and deep empathy are just neurologically sidelined because they simply can't compete with the bright, flashing urgency of digital alerts. And this systemic cascade just continues upward, straight to the frontal lobes. Under this daily, relentless bombardment of phasic dopamine spikes from notifications and endless scrolling, the prefrontal cortex essentially gets overwhelmed. It physically loses its top-down inhibitory control. When the prefrontal cortex can't pump the brakes on the impulses coming from the midbrain, patients basically become mere passengers in their own minds. They're driven entirely by impulse rather than conscious intention. Clinically, this manifests as a complete obliteration of their ability to engage in deep work. That sustained, focused attention we need for complex problem solving, which is basically the very thing that gives human life meaning.
Section 4. Profile, tonic dopamine depletion.
Let's translate all these architectural changes into a generalized clinical profile that you're going to see in your practice all the time. When a patient sits down and complains that they're just killing time or feeling chronically unmotivated, you're likely looking at what researchers call tonic dopamine depletion. Because their brain is repeatedly flooded with massive spikes of dopamine from digital interactions, it naturally downregulates its own receptors to compensate. The result? Their baseline level of dopamine drops precipitously. And when baseline dopamine drops that low, ordinary life, like a beautiful sunset, reading a physical book, having a normal conversation, it just fails to register. Everything feels completely gray and uninteresting. You'll even have patients reporting a phantom pocket itch or phantom phone vibrations. And no, it's not a hallucination. It's the neurological manifestation of a brain literally starving for a chemical signal it's been conditioned to expect every 30 seconds.
Section 5. Supernormal stimuli and withdrawal.
Okay, ask yourselves this, colleagues. Picture this clinical scenario. If you ask a highly connected patient to put their devices away and just sit in absolute silence for 10 minutes, what are you going to observe? Well, they're going to fidget, their heart rate might actually elevate, and they'll report intense physical and mental discomfort. But what is the root neurobiological cause of that specific reaction? The clinical punchline here is that this discomfort is emphatically not just a lack of willpower. Actually, scratch that, it goes way beyond mere boredom. It is a very real, measurable neurochemical withdrawal. See, we've built a world packed with supernormal stimuli. Digital rewards that are way too frequent, way too easy to get, and ultimately super hollow compared to the natural rewards our brains evolved for. When a patient sits in silence, they are experiencing the acute absence of those supernormal stimuli. Their dopamine levels crash, and that resulting agitation is just the brain's desperate, hardwired attempt to force the host to go out and seek that missing neurochemical hit.
Finally, Section 6, Prognosis, Neuroplasticity and Rewiring.
As practitioners, we've got to evaluate the prognosis here. Thankfully, it relies heavily on the physical reality of neuroplasticity. The brain is highly neuroplastic. Just as easily as it was hijacked, it can absolutely be functionally rewired. But, and this is a big but, the treatment plan cannot just rely on sheer willpower. We have to apply ironic process theory, which is also known as the white bear effect. You know the drill. If I tell you right now, do not think of a white bear, well, it's literally the only thing you can think of. Actively suppressing cravings only amplifies them in the brain, so trying to brute force mental resistance against a phone craving is just going to fail. Instead, we have to guide patients to change the physical environments that trigger the thoughts in the first place. The phone has to physically leave the bedroom. Notifications must be disabled at the OS level. We have to change the environment to heal the brain.
By actively managing their environment and taking back control of their attention, which, let's be real, is arguably the most valuable resource on Earth right now, patients can undergo a really profound cognitive shift. The entire goal of our clinical intervention is to transition them away from a reward-driven life, where they're just operating in the survival mode of the midbrain, reacting to every ping. We want to bring them back into a value-driven life, operating securely under the conscious, intentional command of their frontal lobes, capable of deep connection and profound focus.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. And honestly, consider this not just for your future patients, but for yourselves. The trap only works when it remains invisible. Now that you can clearly see the neurobiology behind the curtain, what are the hidden forces shaping your own attention right now? What are the invisible traps in your specific neural environment? And most importantly, what is the one distraction you're ready to let go of today to step out of the theater of your mind and finally get back into the driver's seat? Thank you so much for exploring this vital pathology with me. Keep examining the evidence and keep striving for that conscious command.